Good morning, everyone. A bit of interaction. Come on, you've all had coffee. Good morning, everyone. I knew I could rely on Fiona. This morning, I had thought of actually presenting a PowerPoint, but the organisation asked me for the PowerPoint yesterday lunchtime, and yesterday lunchtime just wasn't possible. So I'm going to speak to you and try and be very clear, Cartesian, virtually French after all these years in Belgium, and keep you with me whilst I'm talking. I was thinking this morning, as I was in London last week for a conference on cinema and education, that I'm really very lucky to be doing my job. Since I was a teenager, my father's always been teasing me for one of my miserable subtitled films. And here I am defending those, not always miserable, but definitely subtitled films, often in the UK, where it's very difficult for European films to circulate. So this morning what I'd like to talk to you about is a number of different things connected to my responsibilities in the Commission. I run the European Commission's media programme, which is the main European programme for European cinema. And UK cinema is actually part of that. So the UK, and in particular through its media desk, who I've seen the head of here today, Agnieszka, supports a number of European distributors, European cinemas, and European productions, to say nothing of the European training programmes run in the UK. But I'd like to divide my speech into a number of different headings. I'll try and be brief. John's already looking worried. And I'd like to start off with a little bit about the current situation, because we're already thinking about how we're going to support this industry from 2014 to 2020. And we're trying to draw on the lessons that we've learned already from the current programme, Media 2007, and I'd like to put that in context. So I'm going to start with talking about the current situation and the changing and very difficult economic context. I'd like to talk a little bit about the new opportunities, the new business models, but the challenges that exist with respect to that. And then I'd like to talk about our priorities at the European Commission and the way in which we're shaping up for support after 2013. And I will try not to use too much Eurospeak, despite my many years in Brussels and those members of my family who say that I can't speak English anymore. And I'll maybe take some water to start. So I don't think I'll be telling you anything new or exciting when I talk about the structural weaknesses of the European audiovisual industry. Fragmentation, different markets, different languages, underinvestment, undercapitalization, and I think one of the most important features and one of the ways in which we're going to try and tackle this in the future, I'd like to come on to later on, is that they're what we call micro SMEs. They're so tiny, they're not even 50 employees often. And this brings a whole raft of specific problems linked to that type of company. In that context, media is an industrial program. Unlike many of the other reasons for intervention for the European Commission based on culture, we're based purely on the industry rationale. We need to reinforce competitiveness and we need to increase circulation. And we believe that you meet cultural objectives through those very strong industrial policies. And if I look at the number of films released in Europe, you see very clearly in terms of box office that European cinema has roughly a 30% share at the cinema, 40 to 45% on television, but only 20% in DVD. And one of the new schemes we put in place 3 years ago was a VOD scheme, and I'll come back to that in the context of some of the challenges of the new economic models. The share that I'm most interested in, and the share on which we base a lot of our interventions, is of course the circulation of what we call horribly non-national European films. That means French films in the UK, UK films in Belgium, Luxembourg, Germany, everywhere apart from in the UK. And that is one of the ways in which we intervene. As I said at the beginning, I'd like to talk about the global context, the way in which the economic situation has affected this sector. Although many of you know it, I think it's still worth saying a word or two about it. There's a financial crisis, but there's also a problem with accessing credit. You've got reduced broadcasters' advertising revenues, which means they're contributing less to cinema. You've got reduced investments in new content. Public money is getting scarcer. We've seen the pressure on our budget. Unfortunately, it's fixed until 2013. And traditional markets are saturated. And in some respects, that's one of the reasons we're looking outside Europe to international markets. All of this is in the context of the second digital revolution. New technologies, new opportunities, new financing sources, but they bring with them their own problems. The changes in distribution and consumption, so you've got new digital services, new ways of producing and consuming content. And that means you have now a new market context in which we're trying to work. I think a useful image in terms of this, which we're calling the second digital revolution, is that the changes in cinema economy are the equivalent in 10 years to a century of previous changes. So we're going through a massive change, and it's difficult to see at this stage which models are going to work. A similar change would perhaps be from silent to sound film, but that was restricted to one type of content. Here we have changes across distribution, exhibition, and production, and an enormous increase in the number of distribution channels. So you've got something equivalent to the appearance of TV in the 50s, or the booming number of TV channels in the 80s, meaning that theatrical exhibition is having to face up to competition from a number of different sources and not just one. As I said, this is not just a problem, this is also opportunities. In terms of circulation, you've got lower distribution costs, a lower break-even point, many more channels for distribution, and in fact some opportunities for niche products. And we see these as potential advantages for European works that could have little space in the traditional model. But these transformations also have a high cost in the short term. You've got new equipment. One of the issues we're working on is the digitization of cinemas. You've got the development of new business models, and you've got the development of new means of production and distribution. And it's difficult for these micro SMEs I was talking about, or even the bigger companies, to meet these costs. If you look at where we situate our policy in respect of this turning point for the industry, we need to support the film industry at a European level to integrate this new market context. And we think that means aiding the market, how to structure the market, to upgrade equipment, and to adapt economic models.